we live? Thank you. So welcome to members and to those who are watching this on YouTube to our Castle Morpeth Local Area Council meeting, which incorporates the planning meeting first, then the Local Area Council afterwards, which will be chaired by my colleague, Councillor Bainan. This meeting is being held in a COVID-safe environment, and as mentioned before, it is available to view on live stream through YouTube at Northumberland TV. Members are asked to keep their microphones on mute, turned off, unless they're speaking. And if I could just ask members to make sure their mobile phones are turned off as well, please. Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chair, I've received apologies from Councillor Dunn and Councillor Towns.
Thank you.
Councillor Towns would be declaring an interest in this one, and the second meeting he can't make, so his apologies for the second part, please. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies from the floor, please? No? Okay, thank you. And then we move to the minutes of the meeting of the Castle Morpeth Local Area Council held on Monday, the 11th of October 2021, as circulated. Can we move those as a true record, please? Lovely, thank you. And do we have any disclosure of members' interests? Councillor Murphy.
Yes, I just need to let you all know that I have a non-prejudicial interest in the planning application, as I have friends who live in Thorpe Avenue.
Thank you. Do we have any other declarations of interest, please? I see no more hands. That's great. Thank you. So we now move on to the determination of planning applications. And there's information in your packs, pages 15 to 18, to explain how this will work. And we then move straight on to item 6, which is page 19. And it's 21/01614/FUL. And it's for the construction of 5 residential apartments with undercroft parking and associated landscaping. Amended plans received on the 2nd of September 21. Design changes, further amendments on the 1st of November 21. And that at High End, 22 Thorpe Avenue, Morpeth, Northumberland, NE 61 1JR. Now, this was meant to come to the previous planning committee. However, after representations from members of the public, we did agree to defer it to this meeting pending a site visit. That site visit did take place on Friday and a number of members were present. And with that, if I can hand over to Ryan for any updates and to present the application, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there's no updates to members following publication of the officer report or the committee site visit undertaken last Friday. So the proposal seeks planning permission for the construction of 5 residential apartments at 22 Thorpe Avenue, Morpeth. The site previously accommodated a detached 2-storey dwelling. However, this was demolished prior to the submission of the application. The site is located within a dense residential area within the settlement of Morpeth. Residential properties bound the site to the north and south, whilst a mature tree belt lines the site to the east, as shown on the location plan. This slide shows the proposed site layout in relation to neighbouring dwellings. Existing soft landscaping upon the site boundaries will be retained and reinforced in areas. The proposed floor plan showed 2 apartments at ground floor level, 2 apartments at first floor level and 1 apartment at second floor level. Undercroft parking would be incorporated within the development. The proposed elevations show the view of the apartment block from the street scene. Following discussions between the local authority and the applicant, the ridge height of the apartment block has been reduced to match the ridge of the previous dwelling that was located at the site. These site photographs show views of the site from the adjacent public highway. And these site photographs show views from within the site as well as upon sort of Thorpe Avenue. This slide shows a 3D render of the proposed development along with the material palette proposed. Condition 3 of the officer report would ensure that precise material details and samples would be submitted to the local planning authority prior to construction of the development above damp-proof course level. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. We now move on to the public speaking part of the application, and we begin with objectors. So we have two, Alan Welsh, who I believe is talking first, followed by Carol Routledge. My understanding is Carol Routledge will come in once Alan Welsh has finished. There isn't any specific time split, is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, the clock starts as soon as you start to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Alan Welsh of 21 Thorpe Avenue and Carol Routledge of 24. We speak for the local community, over 50 of whom have objected. We really want to see development of the site, but it must be appropriate and comply with planning guidance. Now, this proposal should be refused as it's inappropriate, it's too big, too high, too intrusive and too unsafe for the street, and it does not comply with planning guidance. For example, is it compatible with the character of our locality composed of only single-family homes? No, meaning it contravenes multiple policies. Castle Morpeth Development Plan H15, Morpeth Neighbourhood Plan, DES 1, SUS 1 and HOU 9, and QOP 1 of the Northumberland Local Plan. Does this proposal achieve a sense of place by protecting and enhancing the quality, distinctiveness and character of the settlement as DES 1 stipulates? No. Does it contribute to a sense of place which supports community identity and pride as HOU 9 requires? Again, no. And does it make a positive contribution to local character as QOP 1 states? Definitely not. This huge block of flats seriously violates these policies, and its enormous size contravenes DES 1's requirement that development must enhance the character of the site and its surroundings. DES 1 also forbids adverse impact on the amenities of the occupiers of existing properties, and QOP 2 forbids unacceptable adverse impacts on the amenity of neighbouring users. But the adverse impact here on us would be immense. The case officer's report says there would be no harm to the street scene or the wider area, but please note, over 50 people in our community disagree completely. This overbearing development not only harms the privacy, but also safety of local adults and children through increased traffic, more on-street parking, and noise levels, and points made in so many objections, but inexplicably not addressed in the officer's report. In addition, his supposedly acceptable distances between properties and comparisons with Greystoke are really misleading and inadmissible due to the extremely elevated and dominating nature of the site.
So, at number 22, mature trees were felled and the family home demolished. Today's meeting reviews the third planning iteration. Through each iteration, minor tweaks have been made, but they're insubstantial versus the enormous overdevelopment. It's more than twice the footprint and twice the floors of the original property. This immense size creates a top floor 10 metres above the eaves of number 20 and 1 metre below the eaves of number 24. So it overpowers and dominates neighbouring properties, overwhelming residents' amenity. The overlook's dreadful. It's overbearing and intrusive, and contrary to the case officer report, it contravenes both Articles 1 and 8 of the Human Rights Act, which states that a person has a right to peaceful enjoyment of all their possessions, including their home and land, and a substantive right to respect for their private and family life. Outdoor movements of residents, family and friends at number 20, which only has a front garden, and the south aspect of 24 will be permanently and completely on view. Overlook and noise will be magnified by the enormous towering close proximity balconies on the proposal's upper 2 floors. The population density increase will multiply vehicle movements and ad hoc street parking, escalating the danger to all street users. This application is contentious, but objections from the local community and the Town Council are compelling. We are relying on you all to exercise your discretion in your decision, depending on the way you believe should be given to each of our material objections, whilst considering your duty to your constituents and the wider picture. It's just too big a mass, too dominant, intrusive and overlooking, and severely impacts residential amenity. It does not comply with many important elements of relevant local, county and national plans. The substantial material planning objections and adverse impacts on us are so great that we request that you do refuse this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We now move on to the elected member for the division or the parish and town councillors. I understand we have Alison Bayard wishing to speak. Again, your time starts as soon as you begin to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Alison Bayard. I'm Chair of the Planning and Transport Committee for Morpeth Town Council. A large number of local residents have strongly objected to this proposed development, and Morpeth Town Council wish to support their concerns. We note the changes the developer has made to lower the ridge height and reduce overlooking to number 24 with respect to objections from residents. Also, the proposed widened entrance display to the development re-road safety concerns. However, we still object to the development of the site into a block of 5 flats, as opposed to a single detached residence as before. This may be in the same use class, but is a huge difference in terms of up to 10 more cars plus visitors coming and going in this part of Thorpe Avenue, a quiet residential cul-de-sac of individual homes, first built in 1895. The existing properties may be varied, but this proposed development is very obviously not in keeping with the existing street scene and is, in our view, constitutes overdevelopment. The high hilltop situation, which the officer's report acknowledges, would be readily visible from neighbouring viewpoints and partially visible from areas further afield, and large size of the development in relation to those surrounding it will result in overmassing, have an adverse impact on the street scene and dominate the surrounding area. Therefore, the development would contravene the Morpeth Neighbourhood Plan made in 2016, particularly Policy SUS 1.5, in that the proposed development does not follow the principles of good design, which respects the character and appearance of the setting of the development and the surrounding area. And Policy DES 1, Para B, which states that development should make a positive contribution to their surroundings in terms of respecting or enhancing the character of the site and its surroundings in terms of its proportion, form, massing, density, height, size, scale, materials and detailed design features. Furthermore, we are concerned by the officer's comparison of the proposed development to the other large block of 5 luxury flats at the site of the former Greystoke surgery nearby in Howard Road. We would not wish to see any sort of precedent set for other individual homes to be demolished and replaced by blocks of flats which we would consider to be intrusive and inappropriate overdevelopment in a historic market town. In any case, there is no housing need for this sort of development in Morpeth, which has undergone a rapid period of expansion in recent years. NCC very recently acknowledged to the Town Council that we are well over the figure for required housing need. There are already plenty of luxury flats in the town centre, including retirement flats at William Turner Court, new flats at the old registry office, which have yet to sell, and the development already started in Cottingwood Lane. In conclusion, paragraph 130, Part A of the NPPF expects developments to function well and add to the overall quality of the area, not just for the short term, but over the lifetime of the development. We support the residents' view that both the construction and subsequent occupation of this proposed development of a large block of 5 flats on what is a difficult, sloping site on a blind bend will prove to be a significant reduction to their amenity and possibly road safety. We therefore respectfully request that this proposed development be refused planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move on to supporters. We have David Nicholson and Catherine Pimblott. I take it it's the same situation. Once David has finished speaking, Catherine comes in. Is that correct? Yep, lovely. The time starts as soon as you start to talk. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Nicholson, and together with my wife Marjorie, we are the owners of 22 Thorpe Avenue. We currently live in a large house in the country, much too big for the two of us, and for some time we have been looking to relocate to Morpeth, to a more suitable property that will meet the needs of our advancing years. We would like the property to be centrally located, within walking distance of all the amenities, and have a lateral layout. That means no stairs. We have looked at what has been available in Morpeth, but the typical McCarthy and Stone model does not appeal, being too small and with a limited outdoor space. Having not found anything in Morpeth to meet our criteria, we decided to look at development opportunities. 22 Thorpe Avenue had been on the market for some time and had failed to sell. Marge and I looked at the property and were impressed by the size of the site, its location and its magnificent views. The property is located on a large elevated site, one of the largest plots on Thorpe Avenue, the front door of the house being 6 metres higher than Thorpe Avenue itself, which gave the property its superb views, and we decided to buy that property. Our design concept was to create a small upmarket apartment scheme with a roofline no higher than the previous property. This would be achieved by demolishing the existing house and garage and by removing the small hill located on the plot. By carrying out this work, this would also allow for safer access to the site, as well as providing for generous car parking within the curtilage of the property, and also provide for some considerable development gain. We submitted this idea to the planning department using the pre-planning application process so that we could establish if they agreed with our proposals. And based on their response, we would then submit a full planning application, taking into account their recommendations. In due course, we submitted this full planning application, which generated quite a number of objections, the thread of which appears to be the negative view of any apartment development on Thorpe Avenue. We have tried to reach some sort of compromise with the objectors, and at the suggestion of the planning officer, we have amended our drawings 4 times to try and allay any concerns that they may have. And it does give me some comfort to see that these objections have significantly reduced as a result of the amendments that we have made. Marjorie and I intend to live in one of these apartments, together with 4 other families in a similar position to ourselves. These large apartments are of high quality and, I believe, of significant architectural merit. There is a huge demand for these types of properties due to our ageing population, and developments like this are happening all over the country and all over Morpeth. So why should Thorpe Avenue be the exception? What is so special about Thorpe Avenue? Another developer may take the view that the site is big enough for 10 or possibly 12 McCarthy and Stone type apartments, for which there is a proven demand, but this is not what we are proposing here. I would like to conclude by saying that if you agree with your planning officer's recommendation, you will not only be voting to help meet a recognised demand for this type of property, but you will also be helping to free up 5 large family homes for people who need them. And in addition, you will help generate more council tax revenue for the people of Northumberland. Thank you for your time.
So we've worked with Mr Nicholson now for a number of years on a number of successful commercial developments in Morpeth, but this scheme is very much more a personal one, a wish for my client to relocate to the town centre and reside in a high-quality, modern, energy-efficient property with access to the facilities that town centre living offers. Your planning officer has presented a very thorough report, and the points I would like to reiterate to you are: the plot is a very individual plot on the street, unlike any other plot. I hope that your site visit on Friday, you could fully appreciate this. The proposed scheme is larger in footprint than the previous house and occupied the site. The site is a large plot, and due to its elevated position, presents the opportunity to create direct level access into undercroft parking and allows for 3 stories of accommodation to be proposed, critically, within the ridge height not exceeding the previous house. As your planning officer stated within their report, we have worked with the planning department through the planning process from pre-app through to full planning. We've taken on board comments which have been received from consultees and local residents to the scheme. The scheme has been modified to work with...
5 minutes, sorry.
Thank you. I'll have to stop you there. Thank you very much to all the speakers for your input. At this point, we will now move on to questions from members to planning officers, please. Councillor Wearmouth.
Sorry, I feel like I'm asking too many questions, but I'm going to ask a series of them. Can we just have, so we've got some comments there from the Town Council and objectors on, I think, DES 1 and SUS 1, Part 5 or so, I think it was, and that was focusing on the sort of the concept of having apartments in an area that otherwise wouldn't have that sort of development within it. You know, I can understand where objectors are coming from, but is that something that really is fundamentally detailed in policy? Is my first point, because I don't know that necessarily is quite how that policy is in terms of the wording of it.
Sorry, Councillor Wearmouth, just to get this question right then, is this about apartments instead of a single residential property in that location?
Correct. Yes, the basic principle of it, first of all, because that seems to be a fundamental part of what's been objected to.
Okay, Chair. So members, we talk about this all the time in our committee, but the starting point for determining these applications is the set 1 of the Morpeth neighbourhood plan and what that says. And what it's telling you is that this application site, it's within the settlement boundary of Morpeth. It's where we want to see development. It is already a well-developed, densely populated location, and with good links to the town centre. And so a different offering of residential use on this site is acceptable. That's what your policies say. So that really is your starting point. So in terms of whether it's 1 residential property or 5 residential units, there's nothing that separates the 2 off. So it's a question really, when you're looking at this application today, is whether then you think it continues to comply with the design and visual characters. That's the DES 1, Councillor Wearmouth, that you discussed. And this, that scale, form, massing, the design and the materials. Those are the sorts of things that you can have more of a discussion about today. But in terms of the residential use on that site, is acceptable and it aligns with the plan. Thank you.
Next
Councillor
one.
Wearmouth, yes.
Thank you, Chair. So there was a comment made by the applicant regarding objections. Now, I'm unsure how that how to take that comment, because ultimately, I'm not aware of people often withdrawing objections. They just kind of are potentially satisfied, but the objections presumably still stand. Do you feel that you've managed to cross off some of the issues, Ryan and Liz, and is that how that could be that's how that comment could be taken?
Yeah, so in terms of the objections received, the bulk of the objections were received sort of during the initial consultation period when the application was first received. Upon the receipt of sort of amended plans, we then reconsult with neighbours, residents, anyone who sort of commented upon the application. They can then provide further comments upon the application, but any objections that they'd submitted during the initial consultation stage would still stand. So it's not the case that they would then need to submit further objections to an amended scheme. Their objections to the initial proposal would still stand in terms of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, Chair, I do have a few more, but if Councillor Bourne wants to go in first, that's fine.
I'll take Councillor Bourne and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Weymouth, if there aren't any other questions.
Thank you. Just a very straightforward one for me to start with. Obviously, there's undercroft parking on this development. Can you just confirm exactly how many spaces are proposed?
Yeah, so within the development site itself, there are 10 vehicle car parking spaces proposed under Croft for the 5-number apartments, so it's 2 sort of per apartment, and there are 2 visitor parking spaces incorporated within that area as well. We consulted with our highways team as part of the proposal, and that accords with the parking standards, where visitor parking must be accommodated at one visitor space per 4 dwellings. So for 5 dwellings, it would equate to 1.25 visitor spaces. And then obviously within this development, they've incorporated 2 within that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Weymouth, I'll indulge you for some more.
Last 2, and I'll roll them into one, which is just, there was some comment made on separation of properties, and can I just understand if that's abides by the requirement within the policy, and also the height, just to understand, so it's the same height as the previous dwelling on the site?
Yeah, so in terms of the separation distances, policy H15 of the Castle Morpeth District Local Plan states that there must be a minimum separation distance of 20 metres between primary facing elevations. So that will be sort of front and rear elevations. Due to the orientation of the dwelling and the apartment block and the neighbouring dwellings, there isn't any directly facing primary elevations between this, so the separation distances are sort of therefore reduced if it's sort of gable to gable separation. I have stipulated them sort of within the officer report, but in terms of the separation distances to Thorpe Avenue to the south, there's an 8 metre separation distance from the outdoor terrace to the northern gable, and an 11.3 separation distance between the southern build form to the northern gable. And to the north at 24 Thorpe Avenue, there's a separation distance of 12 metres between the northern building line of the apartment block and the southern gable of 24, and a 5 metre separation distance between the building and the shared boundary. Sorry, what was the second question?
Height.
The height, yeah. So as part of the application process, we've worked with the applicant and sort of the planning agent to reduce the height of the apartment block. So the ridge height of the apartment block now matches the ridge of the dwelling that was previously accommodated on the site.
Any more questions, Councillor Weymouth? No. Okay. Any other member would like to ask a question? Councillor Dickinson.
Just a very quick one, Councillor Foster. It was just in relation to the waste management and the comments from Northumbria Water. Now, although they didn't raise any, it not being a single property and multiple dwellings, I'm assuming that they're confident that they can create something on site that would deal with it being multiple properties as opposed to one single dwelling. Because we've often had issues where wastewater management or water pressure in turn hasn't been able to cope with multiple on one site to what was previously a single site, if you see what I mean.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Ryan, if you want to take that one, please.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so in relation to that, we consulted with sort of Northumbrian Water as part of the application process. In terms of the foul sewage and surface water, they'll be disposed of via existing mains, which is the existing arrangement on site. The applicant will be required to sort of agree any discharge rates and connection points with Northumbrian Water, sort of prior to the development commencing, but that's dealt with outside of the planning process, so it doesn't form part of the assessment for this proposal.
Do we have any other questions? No, we've exhausted questions. Then have we got a proposal from the floor, please? Councillor Dodd.
I'll propose the recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jones, thank you. Okay, we now open for debate. Councillor Dodd, can you take your microphone off, please?
Sorry.
Do we have any questions? Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few observations to make. I think the first thing that strikes me, and I think it's really important, is the strength of community objection. And I think our primary role as councillors is to represent the interests of our communities. And I think to get 4 households consulted and 51 objections is quite significant. And I think it's telling us that the community who are already in that area and who already pay their council tax are not happy about the development that's taking place. And I think we need to look at the reasons for that. In terms of, if you look at the way that the real estate locations, prime locations are going, what we know is that if these developments are allowed, then every single time a house comes up for sale in the Thorpe Avenue and surrounding streets area, you will have developers with a lot of money who are easily able to outbid single-family households to buy those properties and to think that they can take those properties down unless they're listed and build something substantially different in that area. And although I think we know that there is already a block of flats in that area, and you could argue that that sets the precedent, I would say that one block like that does not change the nature of a community, but once you get more than one, that begins to significantly change the nature of a community. It's a lovely area, it's single-family households, and whilst people who own those houses and that land have the right to knock them down and build something else if they want, I do think we need to consider the needs of the community in that. Now, Mr. Nicholson has said that he wants to live there, so why not build 2 apartments, 2 stunning, beautiful apartments? As soon as we start saying multiple apartments, then what happens when the next application wants to build 6? Why not 6? 5's a lot, so why not 6? Why not 7? As long as we can tweak them to make them acceptable to squeak through planning. I think there is a wider issue here that we need to consider about how our communities develop, and this community is telling us very clearly this is not what they want to see happen. I also don't think we should underestimate the issue of parking and how stressful parking problems are within neighbourhoods and the amount of conflict that they cause. So a recent survey last year undertaken across Britain showed that 62% of British people have had parking disputes with their neighbours, and 54% of those who responded had said they'd actually had to involve the authorities in these parking disputes. Now, when we were at the site visit, what I noticed was there's quite a wide entrance to this development, there will be, and it has to be wide enough for 2 cars to cross. So clearly all of that stretch of road is gone. You won't ever be able to park there. So the places that we parked when we went to visit will no longer be available to park. And whilst there is the underground parking, we know that with busy households, we cannot guarantee that it's not going to impact on the community. That creates conflict, it creates bad feeling, and I don't think we should ignore those things. So they're my observations. I have no skin in this game. I mentioned, I know people who live in that street, they live nowhere near here, they can't even see the development from their house. And I personally could never afford to live in that area. So I have absolutely no skin in this game, other than I think we should be listening to what this community is telling us. And they're telling us that they don't want this lovely single-family household area to change so dramatically that it ends up like parts of Jesmond, where they knocked down beautiful old villas and built blocks of flats, and it's completely changed the area. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Does anyone else want to contribute? Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a very difficult one. This is one where we've got a development that's been thought out and has responded to neighbourhood concerns to some extent, and has, and I'll be frank, I think the other developments this developer's done are very good quality, and I've got no issue with those. He's a very good developer. But I think the concern I have with this is simply overdevelopment. This is turning a 1-family home into 5 family homes. So you're talking 10 cars minimum, plus you're talking visitors. And I understand the sort of state that you should have 1 visitor space for every 4 to developments, for apartments. But I think that doesn't really take into account this street and the fact that it's in a bit of an awkward location. You're going to get people who visit who don't want to sort of drive into and drive around an underground car park, which will probably be quite tight to get your big 4x4s in, whatever they're driving. And I think it will add significantly to car movements on the street. So I think that overdevelopment is an issue. I also think that the character, and I do appreciate there has been an attempt to look at the materials used and the sort of, but ultimately this was a big red brick house with sandstone lintels that matched or was very similar to a lot of other big red brick houses with sandstone lintels which are around. And that tends to be the character of that area, with a few exceptions built in the 70s that are probably best not to talk about. But it is important, a street scene, and I think the design isn't terrible, but I think more thought needs to go into it to make it go into the visual impact and visual character of the area. So my concerns are twofold. One is just general overdevelopment, talking 1 home and 5 homes, and 2, the impact of the visual character, because I think more could be done to make it look more like an old-style Morpeth house with the red bricks and the sandstone lintels. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bourne. Do we have anyone else who would like? Councillor Dickinson?
I always feel a little bit concerned when I agree with Councillor Bourne, but I can't agree with it all because I wasn't born in 1970, but there we go. So, however, I do have sympathy with the residents in terms of their submissions here, and Morpeth Town Council, who've articulated very well their observations of the application, which clearly show to me that there is a scale of overdevelopment here. There is a withdrawal of what seems to be the character and such of this particular area. And I think just the comments that have been echoed before in terms of, the pressure that would provide on Thorpe Avenue, that you wouldn't get what you would hope from an underground car parking area. You would outprice and disadvantage local families who may wish to live there, etc., etc. So there's a number of issues that this development raises concerns for me, and I have to support the view of the Town Council and Councillor Bourne and Murphy, who have more knowledge of the area than I do, but from what I've seen and taking a drive down there when I couldn't make the site visit, I went separately, and I could see where the objections were coming from, having read some of them at length. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Wearmouth, then Councillor Bainan.
Thank you, Chair. So, for me, this is very finely balanced, but I want to just explain where my thinking is, and I'll do a bit more listening to anyone else who's got any comments before I settle on either side of the fence. I think that in terms of development of this type in the area, I think there probably will be more. We've seen it in Hepscott, we've seen it in this area of Morpeth, and we'll see it in big plots around Morpeth in the future as well. The land is at a premium, the price is going up, and the opportunities there, therefore, and that's not necessarily a terrible thing. It just you have to see it through the lens of whatever our planning policy is in terms of how we determine it. So I'm not necessarily against modifications and changes to some of these plots. In terms of parking, I do think that Councillor Vaughan's right. The temptation is going to be not to potentially to park in some of those places, but ultimately I reflect on the policy, which is what it is. It's has the developer made spaces available? Yes, they have. Are they sufficient and do they accord with the policy? Yes, they do. So therefore, where are you going to go when it comes to arguing about it in an appeal? Nowhere. So that to me is a red herring, I'm afraid, regardless of what you might think about it or otherwise. Scale for me is the bit where if we were going to fall on the side of refusing the application, I think that the mass is substantial, and that's probably my principal and only real concern on the thing ultimately, in terms of what you could hang your hat on in terms of a refusal. And it's it could be better if it was smaller. I'm not convinced that we would win an appeal on the basis purely of the massing either, but I'll consider before I conclude which way I'm going to vote. But I just wanted people to understand where I was coming from.
Thank you. Councillor Bainan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm in a very similar position as Councillor Bourne and Wearmouth. I'll not say Councillor Dickinson because we never agree anyway. It's a difficult decision. I congratulate Mr Nicholson for working with the planners to try and allay some of the concerns of the residents, which is excellent. And everything the developer has done in the past in Morpeth, as Councillor Bourne said, has been of top quality. My slight concern is, again, with Councillor Wearmouth, slight overdevelopment. I personally like the design, and I have got some concerns with the parking as well, but it's a very difficult decision. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to contribute? Yep, there's nobody else wanting to speak, Councillor Dodd, so yes, sum up.
Well, it's with great reluctance that we have to say that the path is in front of us and the path is also behind us. There are a lot of developments similar to this, and when it happens, and there's very little that we can do as a committee other than look to the rule book. We've seen this in the Ponteal and Darras Hall, Medburn areas where we've opposed, and we've got to the point where we've been creamed every time when it goes to appeal. It's not that I want to upset or become anybody of any greatness in the Morpeth area, but I think when we've got a developer who's quite prepared to listen and work with the planners, it's quite rewarding that you might get somewhere, rather than going off to an inspector from Bristol that probably looks at it online and makes a decision. I would far rather that decisions are made here by people from here, and that's the only reason. And that's, there's a lot of developments like this. So if you think it's really those stumbling blocks are there, then obviously we're heading off for appeal somewhere along the line. And I make no bones. I think we would be unwise. So I'll stick to the recommendation that is put in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodd. So we've had a proposal and a seconder for the recommendation as in the report. So we've had that summed up, and we will now move to the vote.
Chair, I don't know. Is it possible to make a second recommendation?
Not until we've had a vote on this proposal.
Right. Yeah.
So, without further ado, could you just knock your microphone off,
Sorry.
please? Without further ado, we will move to the vote on the motion that's been put in front of us.
Yeah, possibly. I think a lot of the concerns are whether it's overdevelopment and the parking. With 5 apartments, would it be possible for the developer to work with the planners on maybe 4 apartments?
I think that would be a completely separate application, Chair. That's all. We from the Ponteal and side of this come with a bit of experience of overdevelopment stroke things like this, and the ripples are coming out to here. Sorry.
Chair, before we go to the vote, I just wondered if I could make a few points, having listened to all the speeches that everybody has come out with today, because it is important that you make a good decision with the right reasons that can withstand an appeal and costs at appeal, importantly as well. So the first point, and the point I made at the beginning, is that this is a residential area. It continues for residential use. You may see it as overdevelopment, but these are already very large single homes here that could be extended for single person's use. This is looking at a residential site and accommodating 5 apartments. It's a different type of residential use, but it continues the residential use. And most importantly, your plan supports that. That's the Morpeth neighbourhood plan supports that, and the Castle Morpeth plan as well. So that's the first point, is a residential. So like I talked about at the beginning, what you're looking at are those other policies within the plan that do deal with overdevelopment, the character of the area, and so forth. So to say that some of the things that you may want to continue to discuss is, do you accept that this is a residential location that can accommodate apartments, or does this have to continue? Is the character of the area for single residential use properties? That is a difficult one because your plans don't separate out what it should be, whether it should be apartments, bungalows, large-scale houses, semi-detached houses. We don't dictate that. So I would caution you to be very careful about what type of residential development you're here. And I think somebody did mention that on this particular site, a different applicant might want to put forward more than 5 apartments on the site of a smaller scale. So that's something that you've got to think really carefully about. It's a residential area and this is a residential proposal. Then the other aspects that, for you to take into account are, heard a lot about the car parking. There is an undercroft car parking here. We have to hope that the way that the development will be built out, that people will use their car parking, because there will be no alternative with the street layout. And we are saying, and our highways are telling you, that the car parking that's been offered with this development meets our standards and policies. There's 2 spaces per dwelling, plus there's 2 visitors' spaces as well. So again, that wouldn't be a safe reason for refusal if you were thinking to propose refusal of the application. Some other points that just wanted to look at the parking. I think the design, the proximity to the neighbouring properties, Ryan's taken you through. The separation standards, and again we're saying that in accordance with your plans those are acceptable. Design is something that you may want to have a further go at, but really all of these things I'm just asking you to think very carefully. If you are minded to go against the officer recommendation, what would be the outcome that you would like to see there, so that we get this right and we can withstand any justification in an appeal scenario. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, without further ado, we will now move to the vote. So all of those who are in favour of the officer recommendation, please raise your hands. Three. Those who are against?
2.
That's 2. And abstentions?
3.
So 3 for, 2 against, the rest abstentions. So planning permission has been granted. Thank you. We then move on to the appeals update, which is detailed in your pack. Are there any queries regarding those appeals updates? No? Right, at this point we'll take a very short break just to allow planning officers to be able to pack up and leave, and for any other officers to step forward. Can we just cut the live feed for a moment, please? Thank you.
couple of seconds. Welcome to the second part of the local area council, Castle Morpeth Borough Council. I was going to say Castle Morpeth.
That's a throwback.
Isn't it just? It's talking to you, Glenn. It kind of confuses me. Right, item number 8 on the agenda is public question time, and we don't have any questions from the public. Item 9, petitions, and again, I don't think we have any petitions. So item 10, local service issues. As you can see, we've got all in Mark here. So Martin, whichever one wants to go first. Oh, yep. What did I say, Stephen? Stephen? Paul should be here.
Thanks, Chair. In Paul's absence, he has prepared a report, so I'll just go through it quickly now. Once again, following what's been a very busy and challenging year, our frontline services continue to deliver services throughout the Christmas period. Refuse crews were out collecting bins on an amended collection schedule. Cleansing operatives worked throughout the period to ensure litter bins were emptied and the streets remained clean and tidy. Grounds maintenance crews continued with storm damage and winter maintenance activities. In addition to this, our tree teams continue to work hard to recover from the devastation caused by Storm Arwen. Our priority immediately after the storm was to assist with clearance of the road network with our colleagues in highways. We then moved on to cemeteries and other public areas with high footfall. We will soon move on to plantations and urban woodlands in due course. Full recovery will take time, and we'll thank councillors for their support during this time. I'm sure you will join me in recognising and praising the huge efforts of our frontline teams over what continues to be a very difficult period. Quick update from different parts of the service. On the waste side, refuse collection service continued to work well over the Christmas period. We did move collection days, but the comms strategy worked very well. We, in Morpeth, received no complaints from residents. Dedicated refuse staff collected around 519 tonnes of residual waste over the Christmas and New Year period. This represents a 20% increase, which is 85 tonnes more than the previous 2 weeks' collections. As you could probably predict, the glass bring sites have been exceptionally well used over the Christmas period. Morpeth crews collected 37% more, which is 30 tonnes glass in the fortnight after Christmas compared to the one before. Street cleansing, the teams have made a great contribution to the post-Arwen clearing debris and litter. We've coped well over the festive period despite the increased demands caused by the storm. Grounds maintenance. Progress on winter works has been impacted by Storm Arwen. However, we are working to recover our schedules and complete the programme as planned. As usual, please forward any work requests to the team and we'll do what we can to get them done. Leaf clearance is close to being completed. Again, please make us aware of any areas of concern. We have additional sweepers deployed in the area to help with the detritus generated by the storm. So we are more reactive than we normally would be, so please pass any requests through. We'll soon start our recruitment process for summer seasonal staff, and that's the end of Paul's update.
Thanks, Stephen. Before I go to questions, all the teams have done a fantastic job over this very difficult period. So can you take our thanks back to all the guys for all the excellent work they've done in terrible conditions and very trying. Right, we'll throw it open to questions for Stephen. Councillor Murphy.
Hi, Stephen. Can I ask you about sorry, I call them the tips, but I know they've got a proper name, the waste disposal sites or whatever they're called.
Household Waste Recovery Centre.
Thank you. That's the words I was looking for. So I've noticed, because I visited a couple of times this last week, that the regulations seem to have relaxed quite significantly. People aren't queuing. We're allowed to pull in and park next to each other. Has there been a change in the recommendations?
Yes, I'll answer that straight away, Chair. Yeah, the company we work for, we work with them to relax the COVID rules in line with many other places, and also we've relaxed the rules after Arwen. You know, there was payments for bringing in certain types of materials. We relaxed that to help people deal with the problems that it generated. Eventually they'll come to an end. I believe we extended it in February, but I'm not sure. That's not actually my side of the service, but That's the explanation for it.
Any other questions for Stephen? Councillor Dodd, you're looking...
I want to ask, is it now highways or...
Martin will do his report first and then you can come into that. If there are no other questions for Stephen, thank you for that, Stephen. We'll bring in Martin.
Has seen a sharp rise in positive tests for a number of individuals from the Castle Morpeth area team alone. We've had 7 individuals tested positive between Christmas and today, possibly with some more to follow before it starts dropping off. So we are being sort of hit with that at the moment. All the town centres are being regularly inspected in relation to the signage, and so we just, if we do have any problems, we'll ask that you give us guys a shout, and we can sort of get other signage out for you if required. In relation to the reactive maintenance, the gully cleansing and where LTP and scheme plan works, everything was sort of put on hold after Storm Arwen. We put all of our resources in relation to our clear up. It is absolutely devastated the Castle Morpeth area, probably more than other areas, believe it or not. So we have every single officer available to ourselves, plus any other contractors we've brought in. The clear up is going to take at least another 2, possibly 3 months. We're still coming across a large number of areas which are being identified. Initially, we undertook a routine, well, didn't take a routine inspection. We basically cast an eye over as many roads as we possibly could for the first 2 weeks to try and identify as many areas as possible. There's a lot of areas still being identified now. All of that work has been programmed, and it will take 2, possibly 3, maybe even 4 months. We're still early stages in relation to getting that program pulled together. What we are finding now is a lot of areas which the debris has sort of moved itself around into our drainage systems, and it's causing a large number of issues in relation to drainage, with ditches which we didn't see, which are all blocked up there now. A lot of the culverts and other drainage which we can't get eyes on immediately from the adopted highway is having a knock-on effect with that. And we are still getting large events in relation to the amount of rain that's coming down. That will continue. So as that continues, these areas are being identified after basically post-event or post-inspection. So we're trying to prioritise the workload as best we can. The gully, we've added gully wagons onto all extra areas to try and get on top of that. We've also put sweepers on, and we're also looking with assistance of our colleagues within the grounds maintenance neighbourhood services to assist with the sweeping of the road to try and stop as much debris getting into the drainage systems as possible, because that is probably our biggest factor at the moment. So we will be working hard to resolve that 6 days a week, and basically same as the neighbourhood services, we were full belt 24/7 for the 4 or 5 days of them 2 storms which were close back to back. Well, the second one wasn't a storm, but it still had major impact on the network. And then continued from there. We have, like I say, we've got all the resources onto that. So I don't have much update in relation to the scheme works, but there is an update of what we've done beforehand and what we're doing. We are looking to try and get back on track, to try and start back with our planned scheme, LTP, and our integrated block transport, and all the other schemes. We're looking to start that, but just at a sort of slow rate from next week. To try and sort of get in, because we still got a large amount of resurfacing works which are programmed and planned, and we must get them in before the end of the year. So we've got a lot of civil engineering works to complete before we can get the guys on the ground. So it's a bit of a balancing act in relation to keeping the network open whilst also trying to get the long-term plan back up and running. The only other thing I've got to add to that at the moment is we're into winter services. COVID hasn't had too much of an impact on winter services at the moment, but I think the North East is slightly behind the rest of the country in relation to people who are starting to be off. Sunderland are starting to be affected quite badly in relation to their services, and we are part of a North East group to try and come up with a plan in case of anything happens, in case the worst situation happens, where we do have a large number of drivers off. At the moment, we don't have, but we may have, but we are coming up with backup plans and hopefully a safety net to try and resolve that as best we can, because we are still in winter, and we will be for the next 2-3 months, and so we are on top of that, as well as the clear up from Storm Marwyn and everything else that's going on with the drainage. We have kept up as much as we possibly can for filling with grit bins and trying to top them up. So we've got extra teams on there over the weekends to try and pull that back in line with our normal service. So as with Stephen, and it is in there, if you could just bear with us and try and try and understand the size. The magnitude of the amount of work that is required needs to be doing. Some things are slipping, and naturally are, and we have to prioritise them on a daily basis. Something which was the top priority yesterday may not be top priority today because of the type of work that's coming through. So just please bear with us. We are trying our best, and we have thrown all resources at it, and we're throwing as much as we possibly can at the clear up, and also at the present sort of emergency responses that we undertake with our colleagues from fire and rescue services as well.
Thanks for that, Martin. And again, before I go to questions, can you please go back and tell all the guys how much we appreciate all the hard work they've done in these very, very trying times. It is appreciated. I know you might not think it at times, but councillors do, and the residents of Northumberland do appreciate all the hard work you've done with your teams. Councillor Dodds.
Dodd. I think Martin has been very optimistic on the 3 to 4 month. I don't think we completely know the scale of devastation. I mean, one little tiny example is Bowlam Lake. I mean, to my mind, that would, if that was a health and safety world, you'd put a barbed wire fence around it. But I know you've closed it, but I think there's one tree over the road just waiting to come down. But apparently the north side of Bowlam Lake is devastated, which is similar to a lot of places. You'd think that a steamroller the size of a football pitch had gone through some. So I think we're going to have a secondary problem, because a lot of these woods would normally need license to be felled and all of that bureaucracy that goes with it, because I've just done a big wood in Scotland. And we're going to have to accelerate some of this, because some of these woods are going to come down early. And then you've got the problem, the ongoing problem of getting the wood or the timber out, which will again cause problems to your drainage, to your roadside, etc. I mean, I don't think anybody knew the scale of what actually happened. I spent 2 days unblocking 2 roads around me with a chainsaw and me Sanderson teleporter. And I just didn't know what was going on. I thought, we'll just get these roads open. And it's the scale. I don't think we've got the scale of the magnitude of chainsaws and lifters and all that's got to go with this. However, you know, there will be some upsides to this. You will get access to roads. I mean, there's still branches down my road, and I'll shift them. I'll make sure that, because the drainage is blocked, I'll just shift it. A lot of people will just get on with the job and do it. However, the real reason I wanted to speak was, I mentioned 2 or 3 months ago about the road Throckley junction with the A69, where some simple work like turn left, east, turn right, west would save an awful lot of problem where people come up to that junction not knowing which lane to be in. And we will have a number of roundabouts like that. It's a simple task. Now that the A69's had a lot of money and hopefully a bit more money on it, it would just start to tamp around the edges. That was all. Thank you, Chairman.
Did you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, when I said 3 to 4 months, Councillor, that was in relation to getting the network open to complete the works. We have absolutely no idea. Like I say, the Castle Morpeth area, believe it or not, was actually hit, and it wasn't expected. It was expected to be more down the coast area and the northern area, but the Castle Morpeth area seemed to be hit worse than anywhere else. And 3 to 4 months, you're right, it is being optimistic, and but I have all the resources on there, and that is purely for the network. We could be talking years before we actually get to the bottom of everything. So yes, I appreciate that 3 to 4 months is optimistic, but it is purely to have the network fully open and running as best we can in a hierarchy order. The Throckley A69 one, I'll chase that up with our traffic and road safety team and ask them where they are with that. I did take that up forward for you last time.
Thanks for that, Martin. Are there any other questions for Martin? No? Thank you, guys. You can shoot off now. Thanks for... No, from here. Yes, Councillor Sanderson.
Well, I just wanted to say something when I did the introduction to this that I'd like our officers to hear, if possible.
Right, thank you for that. We're going to agenda item number 11, which is the budget 22-23 medium-term financial plan. And I think both yourself and Councillor Wearmouth are doing this.
That's correct. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I just begin, and then Richard and I will share this very short presentation. This presentation is around where we currently are as a county, and some of the initial thinking around the budget, although we will not be announcing specific new initiatives tonight, but we will be over the period as we get closer to the budget council in February. But what I wanted to do was to begin by just showing that slide, which is around the state of the county and where we are with COVID. That's actually about a week out of date now, and the figures, the weekly figures are up from about 5,700 to 7,000 plus. The reason I wanted to start with this is because it was this time last year that we were in the same position, that we were actually battling through providing our frontline services, providing all the key services throughout the county with COVID at our backs. And the reason I wanted these officers to stay just for a second is because I'm intensely proud to be the leader of the council, of a county that looks as good as it does, and people need to travel around and just see what a great shape this county is in, despite everything, and despite all the pressure that COVID put on, that our frontline services have continued to perform. And it's very easy to say thank you and not really mean it, but I'm saying it tonight absolutely genuinely. Thank you. I'm really proud of you all, and that is one of the reasons why I'm now going to say that although we haven't completely completed the budget yet, it is my intention to not cut any frontline services at all this coming financial year. A, because we do them so well, and I wouldn't want to spoil that, but B, to say thank you and show our thanks to our guys and ladies across the piece. Okay, thank you. That was all it was. So now we move on to COVID. That's the current situation. And I think that given the fact that we are still where we are now, that the way we run this council and the way we perform our duties is absolutely exemplary. And I think one of the key points that we want to raise right at the beginning is that COVID has hit those people who need our help the most. And you can see from the slides that the figures are such that inequalities are really important, and we'll come back to that in a second. And I'll pass over to Richard Wearmouth to move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Glenn. So whilst COVID could have given us an awful lot of... no, I pressed which button? That one. Yeah. So the next slide is covering the state of the county and the economic recovery, if it can be termed that. One of the interesting things going through COVID is it should have been a huge economic shock, and yet obviously we were the beneficiaries of significant money from government in order to make sure that the furlough scheme was up and running, that businesses got grant support through the peak of COVID and the various waves that we've had, and that we supported businesses across the county. And these graphs here show you that far from having a large economic shock, and that's, if you can't see it, it's going from 2015 through to June of this year just gone, that actually we didn't get that economic shock, and that we've, unlike perhaps even some other parts of the country, we've not seen unemployment go up, we've not seen employment dip or economic activity fall. Such that I think at the moment, and there'll be some more figures out soon, if not already, that unemployment is still at a very significant low at around about 4.2%. That's better than the national average. It's better than elsewhere in the region and anywhere else in the north of the Tyne Combined Authority either. So the economy here is strong. There's undoubtedly there's been some benefits of staycations, but as well our ability to make sure that businesses kept on going through that time. And as we come out the other side, obviously we're looking at the prospect of significant investment by large companies, the likes of British Volt, the likes of JDR Cables in the southeast corner, to name but two. So the state of the economy is good. And here you can see as well, and on the next one, in terms of income, and this is looking at weekly wages and how they've fluctuated. And again, you would have to go back to much earlier in, where is it, 2020, where wages peaked at about £456. We're not far off that at the moment, currently at £450. That's significantly higher than we've seen those averages at other times in previous parts of economic cycles. So again, strong performance there on wages. Doesn't mean that there aren't problems and inequalities across the county, which Glenn alluded to earlier, and that's where we really now need to home in on and try to make sure that we get a fair wage for as many people as possible across the county.
Thank you. So that then leads us on to our corporate plan and our vision and our aims. Please don't feel you have to stay, honestly. Our vision and our aims. So we want to make sure that we have the best possible key points for people to aim and aspire to, around more investment, more jobs, residents, supporting the most vulnerable in our society, and keeping on with the commitment we have to climate change and the action plan. And so our refreshed corporate plan, which will be given out at the same time as our budget, sets out 48 key priorities. And the two main drivers, which I've said before to Council, so forgive me for repeating it again, are, for us as a Council moving forward, the two main things are to make sure that we positively motivate new business, we support existing business, and we look after those people who need our help most. So we will want to ensure that we do everything we can to attract new business. We will want to continue to support existing business, and that looks, for example, like making sure that in our town centre car parks, we do not introduce car parking charges. That costs the council quite a lot of money, but that is our way of doing the best we can to support existing business. And we are holding at the beginning of March an inequalities summit, which will bring together all the partners that we work with in the field of inequalities, so that we can begin to make real political progress in addressing all the good work that's being done at the moment, but supporting that and moving that forward a stage. Thank you.
So the next slide here is covering the overall funding context of what makes up our budget, and you'll appreciate, councillors, that it doesn't just our income doesn't just come from council tax; it comes from a number of other sources. So all councils across the country are operating in a period of some financial uncertainty. We've got pressures on our budget, obviously, in terms of social care. We're all living longer and genuinely healthier lives, but with those longer lives comes more pressure on our social care, and we've got to make sure that we're fit for purpose as a council in that regard. We've got cost pressures arising from those changing demographics, pay and price inflation, and you've all heard an awful lot about inflation, whether it's fuel costs, whether it's building materials, as everyone comes out of hibernation from COVID and starts thinking about what building they want to put in place for the future in the private and the public sector. And we have a large amount of work that we're doing in terms of building, as you know, through the capital programme. We've got the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 on council expenditure and income, albeit that we've been very much assisted by the government in facing those pressures. And then we've got pressures more generally on national finances, because we all know that whilst we've done significant work to support people during the pandemic, and we've gone through that furlough process and all of those other support mechanisms, eventually all of that has to be paid for, and ultimately that's going to come from the taxpayer in the longer term. The government published consultation on its spending at the end of last year, and that covered a 3-year period. In the time since, we've, as part of that process, we've been told that there would remain the council tax limit without a referendum at 2%, and that there would be a precept for adult social care available at 1% over the next 3 years. There was a provisional settlement at the end of the year for 1 year only from central government, and that represented a real terms increase of nearly 7% in terms of the core spending compared to the previous financial year. So, that could have been significantly worse. That has helped in terms of our core spending power, but don't forget it's only for a year, and so that doesn't allow us necessarily to plan for the longer term and indeed through the subsequent 2 years of our medium-term financial plan. And then in terms of provisional settlement confirmed for council tax referendum, therefore it would be 2% council tax increase. The adult precept at 1% would go forward, and I think there's a bit dropped off the slide there, but you can understand where we're headed with that bit. And then I think, Glenn, you're covering this bit.
Okay, so delivering for the future. So a climate change action plan is hugely important to this administration, and I think most members of the council as well are very supportive, and lots of things in there that are very detailed and complex. And lots of things that are really important as well, that everyday things like setting up community groups throughout the county that will encourage climate change. There may be an announcement on some funding on that in the budget. And as well as that, the free tree offer, which was guffawed at by some when we tried it and introduced it a couple of years ago, but last year it was a huge success, and it has been again this year. So attracting investment, encouraging huge investment in the county continues to be really important, and there will be announcements on this fairly shortly as well. The Borderlands Place programme, which gives money to the rural areas in the county as well. So we're looking at Wooler and the £10 million at Geffrin Whisky Distillery and Visitor Centre, a brand new maltings in Berwick, for example. And the town deals, which are going to be really exciting. Energising Blythe. There's £4.8 billion in the Levelling Up Fund that has got to be allocated. We want to make sure we get our fair share for that. For across the county, and we're looking at places like Ashington, Bedlington, and places like Choppington, which have so much to offer. We just need to support these places, and we will do that. the Northumberland line, which will open in a few years' time, and will offer jobs and opportunities to everyone, as well as regular train journeys into Tyneside. The road infrastructure, we are currently kind of in a hold position as far as the A1 dualling is concerned, as I think you possibly all know, because of an environmental audit being carried out on all road building across the country. But I hope very much that we can proceed with that as soon as possible. Moor Farm Roundabout is incredibly important, of course, and the Blythe Relief Road, which is still very much on the agenda. Progress on plan site for extra care housing, really important in this county. School bills, Berwick, we have a large amount of money in the budget for James, Calvert, Spence likewise. And we are moving forward with an item going to our cabinet tomorrow on the Seaton Valley schools, which is a very exciting project. We are going to invest more in our country parks because over last year, country parks and parks generally showed their value in terms of places for people to go, to get closer to nature, to get close to peace and calm and the countryside and the fine environment. So we are going to make an announcement on country parks and public conveniences, because public conveniences should be as easy to access as any other part of a townscape. So public conveniences should be on a council spending list as much as new streetlights, in my view. Fundamentally important, and there will be an announcement on those as well as town centre parking and cycleways and walkways. So lots to be excited about, lots to do. We are nearly at the end of this, so please bear with me. I'm passing over to Richard, who will tell you about the spend and the savings in the budget.
Thank you, Glenn. So, in terms of the medium-term financial plan model, we've got a savings requirement of 9.7 million, which has been identified to balance the budget in 22-23, with provisional savings required for around about 28 million in the following two financial parts of the financial programme. And people always look at this and say, well, you know, what does that actually mean? How when you're describing these things, savings, is it, you know, what constitutes a saving? And ultimately, this isn't necessarily about, and as Glenn has said, we're protecting frontline services and continuing to provide them in the same volume, the same way, to make sure that we're supporting people using our services in the way that they expect and need to. Sometimes it's about doing it better, about finding ways that the council could perform better, whether it's updating the way that our systems interface with each other with IT, whether it's about just having you know, a better approach to things. These things can be done. Councils or our budget on an annual basis, we're the best part of £1 billion, £1 billion company, 800 odd million pounds we spend. If you can't find ways to do things better on occasion in business and in councils, you're not doing your job properly, and that's where the vast majority of these savings will come from. You know, I felt when we came into office that the place was a bit creaking and archaic. We've made some progress, but we've got a lot more progress that we want and need to make ourselves a really innovative and forward-thinking organisation that I know that we can be. So the approach in terms of identifying spend and savings has been a review of services to keep reductions in frontline services to a minimum. In fact, I don't think that there will be any reductions at all. Ensuring that services and financial planning is fully aligned with the corporate plan, i.e. We've set out what it is that we want to do. We've got to make sure that actually that's what we're delivering, and it's what the people voted for and asked us to implement. Maintaining the strong financial position of the council so that it has sufficient reserves. The council does have significant reserves. Of course, reserves can only be spent once. Revenue is spent year on year, and so we're going to have to look at the substantial reserves that we do have and making sure that we're spending them to drive those efficiencies, to change the way that we're doing business, to make sure that we're doing it better, so that in the future there is less of a tax burden, less of a requirement to increase tax in subsequent years. Maximising income generation is important. There's lots of ways that we can be innovative. We've done some of that in the past, and there's more that we can do in the future. Ensuring that the council demonstrates value for money, and that ultimately comes to the absolute essence and core of what I've just said there. You know, just because you're spending shed loads of cash doesn't mean that somehow that's fantastic. It isn't. If you're not doing it well and you're not delivering top quality service at a fair and sensible cost to the taxpayer. And you know, to revisit something that I've sort of half said there, investing to save is key where we spot opportunities to make sure that we drive those efficiencies. And on the next slide there, you can see roughly how those savings will manifest themselves in terms of the various portfolios and services across the council.
Good. So that basically is it, Mr. Chairman. Richard and I will be doing a public question and answer, which is something we introduced last year as part of the budget process. We know that we've got, I think it's over 200 responses already from the public on their ideas about what they feel we're doing well, what we might do better, and those things are important to them as part of the budget process. That goes on till the 21st of January, and that will feed into the final paperwork as well. We'll also be asking overview and scrutiny committees to give their views when we get nearer the budget, which will probably be around about the beginning of February. There'll be a cabinet meeting then, and then full council will meet on the 23rd of February to discuss the budget. I'm really grateful for the time that you've allowed us on this. We'll be doing all the local area councils, and we are, both of us, more than ready to take any questions either now or at any time. I would just finish as I began, which is to again underline my thanks to all the staff across the services. We have fire and rescue, these, you know, it does tend to make you a little bit emotional if you remember what it was like during Storm Marvin, and if, like us, you had 5 nights without any power or heat, and all the phone calls that we took and all the help we tried to give people, and a very taxing time for many of us as councillors. And I relied hugely on everyone involved in the council across the services. And so I will finish as I began, Mr. Chairman, by saying thank you to them. A genuine and huge thank you, and we hope that we will move forward through this budget as a team, supporting each other as we did last year. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments, and I think everybody agrees with wholeheartedly with those comments, Councillor Sanson. Right. Are there any questions for the leader or the deputy leader? Councillor Dodd and then Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, welcome everything that comes down the line. It's never a tricky process, you know, it's never an easy process, should I say. And, you know, thank you for coming along. I know this is home turf, as it were, but you've got to go to other places with the double act, and wish you well with that. There's one tiny area that I think we need to, I'm going to keep an eye on, and it's not just Northumberland, it's this sort of image that people have of, we'll plant a tree and get on the plane. Or the rewilding of the countryside is the answer to all our ills. As a farmer, we have to grow crops. It's dead easy to grow weeds and things you don't want, but it's a bit of a skill to get the crop absolutely right, to get a yield, to get payment, to get this, to get that. And it's the rewilding of certain areas. I've got another farm in Dumfries, and there's certain areas that we've sort of, I wouldn't say abandoned, but what comes is not what you get on the television on Countryfile of some little glade with everything living there. You get gorse, you get bracken, you get lots of things. And we're not dissimilar. And I fear for the uplands of this county, where we have a very, very delicate balance of those scraping a living off the countryside, might suddenly not be able to scrape a living, and then we've got a problem of this rurality that we live in. Nobody's going to live there, or be able to live there and support themselves. So I for one, want to keep an eye on this, and it shouldn't be the holy grail that all we've got to do is rewild a certain bit of land and plant some trees. I think there's more to this than meets the eye. We've just had a very awkward storm. I had somebody come round, oh, we're coming to assess the damage in your farm. I said, what do you mean, what damage? I don't know if you recall when they widened the A696 for the military vehicles a number of years ago. I got some of the spill from that when they made that extra concrete lane that was never used, and I built like a bund and then planted it with trees around parts of my farm, and that shelter belt worked. And I think that we take a lesson from that shelter belts that used to be planted of years ago all over do work. Shelter for animals, wildlife, property. So I just think there are some lessons of history. Thank you, Chair.
Could I just come back very quickly on the point about about agriculture and the importance of agriculture to Northumberland? I think everyone realises that it's a hugely important industry, like tourism, like fishing, like a whole range of other important industries for the county. And there are serious concerns around the future direction that government want us as farmers, as many of us, to follow. As a council, it is very important that we listen to farmers, we listen to farming, and we find that balance between, on the one hand, looking at environmental land management and rewilding and forestry, but on the other hand, recognising that we have to be self-sufficient in food. We can't rely on imports. Perfect example of relying on imports is looking at gas and electricity prices. This is what happens if you rely on external suppliers. You get chaos, which is what we have now. So we've already held our first meeting. We've got 2 more meetings. It's involving the north of Tyne Combined Authority. We're involving the National Park, we're involving tenant farmers, the National Farmers Union, and our environmental team to come together with some concrete proposals that we will send to George Eustace and DEFRA, highlighting the importance of agriculture, highlighting the importance of that balance. So it's something that we do take very seriously, and I'm glad that Richard's raised that, because it is a very important point.
Thanks for that, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Dodd made a good comment as well at the end regarding shelter belts and things like that, because, Richard, it's a lot of this tree planting, rewilding and so on and so forth. It's about connectivity of, hedgerows and all that kind of stuff. It's not just about planting a load of trees in a handful of fields and thinking that somehow you've changed the world, because you wouldn't have. It's that kind of sensitive planning and actually managing the forestry and making sure that it's done properly and that it's done for a net benefit that actually could bring significant sums of money into the economy. But there's a whole bit around it, about having a good college, having good training facilities, being a showcase and all that sort of things. There's loads of stuff that can be done around that. And there's loads of stuff, and pleased that Stephen stayed, because there's loads of stuff that the County Council can do around this as well. We've got a lot of forestry, a lot of our own land, where some of this can be brought to bear, and we can be an exemplar for it, and we're probably going to be planting, I guess, an awful lot of trees as well, because a lot of them of course have fallen over in this just a month or so ago now.
Thanks for that. Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Point of clarification, councillors. So, Councillor Sanderson, when you were speaking to Stephen and Martin before, you said, I can assure you, there will be no cuts in frontline services, which is fantastic news, of course. Were you specifically referring to neighbourhood services, or were you referring to across the county? Because then Councillor Wearmouth went on to say that you're hoping there's not going to be any cuts, but I wonder if you could just clarify for me.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what I said. I think what I said was we haven't finalised the final bit of work on the budget yet, but it is my ambition, it's my wish that there should not be any cuts in frontline services. So if I did not, I thought I had, but if I did not add that, because we haven't yet finished the final consultation, we need to have some final figures worked out. But it is my intention that there should not be cuts in frontline services.
Yeah, I think it's just sort of terminology, really. I mean, ultimately, we're in the middle of a consultation process. If loads of residents came and said, do something differently around this, then that would be, we'd have to reflect on that, but entirely as Councillor Sanderson has said. Thank you.
Councillor Dolan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say a big thank you as well for coming along and giving that speech. It's my first time as a councillor having gone through that budget and that pre-speech, that presentation that you presented there. You can see a lot of work goes into that as well, not just from councillors but from officers as well. And I think that managing to having the ambition to reduce and not cut frontline services is excellent. As a county, I think we should be proud of what we've achieved there. And I'd like to echo the sentiments as well to say that I myself, as a councillor, like many of the councillors, had during Storm Orban had many people contact them, and it was a difficult time for quite a few people. And the officers and this county council has done a fantastic job during that time and since then as well. So thank you to everybody as well for that. And I think that, it just shows what great work we've put in as well. So thank you for coming along and giving that presentation.
Thanks for that. Are there any other questions for the Leader and Deputy Leader? No? Thank you, gentlemen. Item 12 on the agenda, the youth service. There was a presentation from the youth services, but that has to be had to be postponed due to COVID hitting all their staff. Item 13 on the agenda, guys, from the Northumbrian Fire and Rescue Risk Management Plan 2022 to 26. Do you? Yes, of course you can. Can we stop streaming for 2 minutes? Thank you. Great. Welcome, gentlemen. I'll let you introduce yourselves and your presentation. Great. Right-hand button. Yeah, we've got it. You're on.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to come and briefly update the Castle Morpeth LAC on the latest draft of the Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service Community Risk Management Plan, which is going to cover the period April 1st, 2022 to 31st of March 2026. I'm joined tonight by Deputy Chief Fire Officer Graham Binning and Simon Daniel on the end, who's seconded from our Community Safety Department to work on our HMI inspection process and the Community Risk Management Plan development. I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to do a page turn. I'm not going to go through line by line on the plan in any detail. This is really just bring the plan to your attention, explain what it is and where it's come from, and invite your participation in the public consultation exercise. We have a community risk management plan because it's a statutory duty for us. So Section 21 of the Fire and Rescue Services Act actually places a duty on the Secretary of State to produce a fire and rescue service framework, which is the document on the slide there. And that fire and rescue service national framework document outlines how fire and rescue authorities will discharge their functions with regard to the fire and rescue service. It's got the main priorities on there. The ones of particular relevance are bullets 2 and 4, which are identify and assess the full range of foreseeable fire and rescue service related risks their area face. And the fourth bullet is be accountable to communities for the service that they provide. So this is why we undertake a public consultation. This is why we're advertising the new draft community risk management plan so widely. And I'll talk a little bit about the duration of the public consultation towards the end. So in a bit more detail, you've obviously got copies of it. What each plan must have is it must reflect the up-to-date risk analysis for the area, and it's got to demonstrate how prevention, protection and response activities will be used, hopefully holistically, so there isn't any conflict, to best prevent and mitigate the impact of those risks which we've identified. We do have separate strategies for both emergency response, protection and prevention, which sit beneath our community risk management plan. And as we say, we think they're all supported, and they all identify how each of the specific strands of the service delivery of the fire and rescue service go to complement and support that risk reduction. So the other bits on there, outline required service delivery outcomes, set out its management strategy and risk-based programme for prevention and fire safety. Must cover at least a 3-year time span, and it must reflect effective consultation throughout its development. And importantly, it's an important point on the last bullet, it should be easily accessible and publicly available. And that includes the way that the document's written. So we've tried, and sometimes it's difficult being in the fire service. You know, we're second only to the military for 3-letter acronyms. So we've tried to craft this in a way that a layperson or somebody who is not a fire service professional should be able to read it and understand exactly what we're proposing to do for the next 4 years. Previously, our community risk management plan was called the Integrated Risk Management Plan, and then it was simply known as the Fire and Rescue Plan. But regardless of the name, and I think community risk management plan actually tells you what it's all about, much more simply and effectively than the other two titles it's had, the principles remain exactly the same. I would give some reassurance to councillors that this is not a plan which is set in stone. Quite clearly, a lot can happen in 4 years. So the plan must be flexible and able to respond not just to new and emerging risks, but also unforeseen circumstances and impact. So on that basis, what we do every year is we produce an annual update where we look back at what we've achieved and what our performance has been on the year just gone, what we're needing to do for the coming year, and importantly, assess whether changes to our risk and risk assessment or service delivery models are required to meet what we're identifying as being reasonably foreseeable incident types, which we will be responding to. If anything within that annual ongoing assessment requires further public consultation, we'll undertake it within the time span of the plan. We also, and I think this is, again, to give you some reassurance, we don't develop this plan in isolation. We have worked with some specialist companies, one in particular called ORH, who support our planning process by building simulation models of the service to predict what the impact of potential changes on our community risk and resilience will look like. This, from my point of view as the Chief Fire Officer, gives us a greater confidence that we define and communicate those risks across our area, and that we can have confidence that we evidence how we match our resources to the risk in an appropriate manner. Ultimately, what the Community Risk Management Plan is all about is providing assurance to the Fire Authority, the County Council and our communities that, as far as reasonably practicable, we've got the right resources in the right place to deal with and respond effectively to the risks that we have in Northumberland. With within the report, there's a slightly new departure where we felt that it's important for our communities and the public just to understand the process that we go through. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but we want them to understand the process which we undertake to analyse the risk within Northumberland. So during the development of the plan, we've used a pretty standard definition of risk, which is a combination of the likelihood and consequence of a hazardous event. And that is a commonly used risk definition across the fire and rescue service sector. So in the case of fire and rescue related risks, they are hazardous events, are incidents that we attend or could be reasonably expected to attend. And we've got that responsibility to identify the incidents and work with both communities and partners to minimise or prevent the likelihood of those happening in the first place. We've been pretty successful at that, I have to say, and pleasingly in the last 10 years, we've managed to reduce the number of incidents we attend by about 21%. Incidents in 2020 were about 10 or 11% lower than the previous year. And you'll probably see from that slide there, and it's just a copy from the plan which you have in front of you, that 10 specific incident types account for over 90% of all of the incidents that we attend. So that's where we put our main focus, our drive and our energy, because by reducing those, we're going to have the biggest impact in reducing not just the risk to our communities, but also that consequential impact on fire and rescue service in terms of the use of our resources, any impacts on productivity or prevention work, and also minimising any financial implications for the service. So in a little bit more detail, we do analyse incident and response data on all types of incidents we attend. We do use multiple data sources relating to fire and other risks. So we use population data, demographic data, building information, road network data, and we apply modelling to those to determine risk scores and to identify which characteristics have the strongest relationship to incidents actually occurring in the first place. And that's how we focus our resources on trying to drive that risk relationship down. For instance, we know that there's a really strong correlation between deliberate outdoor fires and crime deprivation, and this is the recorded crime for 4 major crime types: violence, burglary, theft and criminal damage. So these are some of the areas where we've got some really coterminous activity underway with Northumbria Police, and we're getting those mutual benefits out of working collaboratively. Sorry, it's a struggle. Well, I'll need to change my notes. I'll have to think of something else to say instead of that with partners. And one of the things which is also a factor in is the potential life risk and severity that the incidents pose, as I'm sure you would expect. That's just an example of what some of our risk modelling looks like. So the map is just is what one of those risk modelling models for dwelling fires looks like. The darker the area, the more likelihood you are to be in an area where you're going to have a dwelling fire. The other part of that that slide there is part of our performance management framework and the information that we use to just determine how successful we are at risk reduction. During 2021, we had 199 house fires, 90% of which were accidental. So just using dwelling fires as an example, if you access the community risk management plan, what you'll see is that within the plan, we've specifically communicated what we already have in place to try and address 12 or 13 incident types and drive that risk down. But we also have additional actions which we're looking to put in place for us to further drive down that incident frequency and outcome. So there's what we already do, but what we intend to do as well within the next 4 years. So even when we're looking at something like dwelling fires, which we have been very successful at trying to reduce the number, we're committed to a continuous improvement which cuts across all of our service delivery areas. In most cases, there's always something else you can do to improve things, but it then sometimes just becomes a potential judgment call on how you get best utility and value from what capacity and resource that you have. But it's just so that it's just a demonstration of the 13 or 14 incident types that we've already covered off within the plan. And as I've already mentioned, we look at emerging risks as well. So also within the plan, we've identified what we believe to be main or emerging risks. And whilst incident types such as climate change, which is mentioned there, extreme weather, pandemic, have always been part of our plan assumptions, given recent experiences of COVID, the beast from the east, Storm Arwen, to name a few, it's quite clear that they're putting significant strain and challenge on us as a service, and we need to be sure that we continue to look at whether those risks are changing, and I believe particularly with climate change they are. So we just have to have some confidence that we are able to reasonably meet any increases in frequency and consequence that those emerging risks would bring. We've mentioned the corporate plan. Councillor Sanderson mentioned the corporate plan. We do use that as a reference when we're drawing up our community risk management plan. So we try to look at where inward investment, economic development, regeneration, housing and commercial development will potentially impact us. It doesn't always necessarily lead to an increase in risk, but it is a process that we go through just to give ourselves assurance that it's not going to become an issue for us as a service. I've put on the bottom there British Road and the Ashton Blythe and Tyne rail line. That's work which is currently ongoing, so as a service we're plugged into some fantastic relationships with colleagues from other parts of Northumberland County Council. So we're trying to assess what that might mean for us as a service when both British World and the new rail line come on board. And it may not actually change anything for us. It may not change our operating model. It may not change the training we need. It may not change the equipment requirements that we've had. But that's not really the point of the community risk management plan. The purpose of it is to make sure you get hopefully upstream of these risks as they're emerging, and you give yourself greater confidence assurance, both as an authority, a service, and for our communities that we're able to meet whatever they will bring. I'm not going to run through this. It's a slightly busy slide. It's a straight lift from the plan covering our aims and priorities. But for next year, it may just be helpful for you to know that we just intend that to be a year when we're going to undertake a number of important reviews and evaluations of current service models and delivery, and also a focus on responding to the latest recommendations and areas for improvement from our second HMI report into the service. That's going to be managed through our new performance assurance framework and the continuous improvement plan, which has already been audited by NCC's internal audit team, has been fit for purpose, and it's going to be overseen by the Strategic Performance Board, which actually the Deputy Chief is going to be chairing. So whilst there isn't anything particularly significant proposed in year one of the community risk management plan as it currently stands, there may be more for us to discuss and consider once we've done that evaluation and assessed the different operating models and service delivery that we undertake. So I would guess that's going to inform our future strategic direction. So there may well be some additional movement which we need to bring back in year two, and which, as I've already mentioned, may be subject to future and further consultation. So that's essentially it. It was just to give you a better appreciation of what the plan's all about. I know the paper which came with it didn't get into a lot of detail, but we just want. This is the first of our 5 sessions with the local area councils. There will be papers going to execs, to informal cabinet. We'll given a briefing to scrutiny as well. All as part of the public consultation, which actually started last Monday and runs through until the 16th of February. The links on the slide there will take you not just to the survey, but it'll take you to an online copy of the plan as well, and links to the draft version are currently available on all of our social media and website platforms. So we really want as much feedback as we possibly can. I think only by doing that do you get a really robust and resilient strategy to take us forward for the next 4 years. And I very much look forward to getting people's views on the plan as it currently stands. So thank you. I'm quite happy to take any questions, and if that's one of the reasons I brought Graham and Simon with us. If they're too technical, I can always defer.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. Dr. Dodd.
Yeah, I think go back to the storm of 2008. I don't think you had a boat.
No, we didn't. We didn't.
So obviously times change, and you have to be. What's the animal that changes his spots all the time? Or chameleon. You know. You know, you seem to be the good guys that seem to be having to help out everybody else at certain times. You know, I think you've gone from a fire brigade that, you know, was a fire brigade that now does traffic accidents, all and sundry, heart, defibrillator training, injections. You know, I think you have to be light on your feet, as you're the guys who, it seems perceived, haven't got a lot to do because you've done so much to stop fire starting in the first place. So I applaud what you're trying to do, and I hope it comes off, because, you know, the rest of the services probably need you. And you need to be flexible and light on your feet and be able to respond to all of that. So I welcome the way you're trying to change things. Well, we've had something tonight just through planning that changes a street somewhat to a, you know, from a house to a little block of flats, you know, which has a different sort of reaction when it comes to a fire. Look at Newcastle, they're building Hadrian's Tower or whatever. Not, you know, are we equipped as a northeast? You know, these are the things. And again, I applaud the fact that you're being light on your feet and changing your colours.
Can I just respond to that very bit? You're quite right, Councillor. I think you know I've been in Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service for 35 years at the end of January, and it's just unrecognisable from the service that I joined, and pleasingly so, I have to say. So within that, you know, we're quite clear that our aim is making Northumberland safer, and we are not really focused on whether that's just purely from a fire perspective or a rescue perspective. We take the view that if we can add value to other parts of the county council or other partners doing anything which supports that aim, we will try our best to do it. We're the smallest fire service in the UK, so you know we've got some limited capacity, but we will always try to add value where we possibly can. And I think one of the things which certainly resonates with me is just the technical competence of the staff that we've got now is just so far removed from when I joined. The things that they have to get involved with and be competent and professional about is just on a scale which, well, I'm pleased I joined when I did. I think is the easiest probably way of summing that up. So I'm not sure I would actually manage to get into the service anymore. Graham, I don't know if there's anything you want to.
Yeah, if it's okay, yeah. Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to be here, and I think I really welcome your comments. And as you'll hear, my accent isn't exactly a local one. However, with a farm in Dumfries, you'll hear something not a million miles away.
From Ireland,
I think the thing you'll read when you a thread that you'll pick up throughout the entire community risk management plan is continuous improvement and collaboration, and that's with regards to the offering that we are shaping up. I stood in the council chambers a year past November for a final interview for this role, and my promise was to wrap up what collaboration can look like and what it can deliver. and not as a concept. I brought proof of what I'd delivered up in Scotland to bring to this service. What we will do is we will demonstrate where our service priorities span across the boundaries of local partners across health, social care, police, third sector. And what I've found for 14 months now is every single time I've reached across the partner boundary, whether it be County Council or fellow emergency services, or in fact other North East emergency services, is there's been a welcome hand and a welcome ear to listen to what I'm suggesting might be an offering. Without labouring it, what I will say is we are, for the first time ever, are co-producing a policy, and we're co-producing with health, social care and third sector with regards to our safe and wellbeing offering. And that's to make sure that we'll span the boundaries when it comes to smoking, alcohol, falls and dementia. And all of those 4 priorities, if you think how many of those are to do with deprivation, they're to do with age, they're to do with mental health, that's the way that we're shaping our offering. And it means that we are small, but I think we can demonstrate that we're small but perfectly formed, with an ability to bend and flex in whichever direction we need to at whatever point. And there's probably no better example than I can give you than the way we stood up when West Hertford became the centre of operations for the Storm Arwen response. So I'm 14 months in post. I intend spending the rest of my career here. I'm fiercely proud of the Northumberland Fire and Rescue brand and product, and we'll champion it wherever we can, whenever we can.
That's excellent news. Are there any more questions for the gentleman? No? Gentlemen, can I thank you very much for your time coming along with the presentation, and thank you all and pass on to all the guys all the work they do. It is greatly appreciated. Right, last couple of items. Item 14, which is in your papers, pages 85 to 90, local area council work programme. And if there are any subjects, this is your committee, that you wish to be put onto the agenda, please contact myself or Leslie. But it's vitally important that we get input from you, the members, because it is your committee. Any urgent business? I don't have any, and I'm looking around, nobody else seems to have. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and we close the meeting at 6:10.